Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Dennis Stockman, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Lieutenant Commander Phil Bywaters. We warmly welcome the family of Private Cecil Fleming Morgan, whose story will be told shortly. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by family and visitors to the memorial. Please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him in Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Private Cecil Fleming Morgan. Cecil Morgan was born about 1897 in Sydney, the son of William and Elizabeth Morgan. His father worked in the hat department of Peepees Limited, where he was employed for nearly 50 years. Cecil attended the Summer Hill Public School in the inner west of Sydney and later went on to work as a boot salesman. He also took an interest in military matters, having been a senior cadet for 4 years and serving in the Citizens Militia with the 31st Infantry Regiment. In June 1916, Morgan enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force. He had to go back to obtain his father's permission before going into camp, as he was only 19 years old. He entered camp in July with a letter from his father giving him unreserved consent for his son to fight for his king and country. After initial training, Private Morgan left Sydney on the 8th of November 1916 aboard the troopship Port Nicholson with reinforcements to the 45th Battalion. Landing in England early in the new year, further training followed until Morgan joined his unit in France in early April 1917. Days after joining his battalion, Private Morgan entered the front line near the French village of Narroy. His battalion had been in reserve for the Second Battle of Bullecourt and avoided heavy casualties. In June, Morgan's battalion was heavily engaged during the Battle of Messines in June and suffered a significant number of casualties. With the focus of operations moved to the Ypres sector, the 45th Battalion remained in Belgium. In the early hours of the 10th of October 1917, the 45th Battalion entered the front line at Zonnebaker. When the battalion came under a heavy German artillery bombardment, Private Morgan was wounded by a shell fragment. As the bombardment continued, he was struck again and this time killed instantly. He was buried nearby, and following the war, his body was moved to Tyne-Cot Cemetery. Cecil Morgan was 20 years old. 17 years after his death, his sister gave birth to a son who was named in his honour. Cecil Morgan's name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among more than 60,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Cecil Fleming Morgan, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the and the sound of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We'll leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fear of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over, but in Australia, they'll be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. Thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial, and good evening.